With just days left to pass potential new laws, lawmakers are busy in session. Hundreds of bills waiting for action. So what does it take to pass something in this last stretch? We're talking to the state senator who's leading efforts to pass a big artificial intelligence bill. From regulating to embracing the tech, it's being met with struggle. But first, a budget must be signed off by the governor. The battle that's shaped up has dominated this session. Rallies, pleas, and post-pandemic needs. The frustration felt over the fiscal guardrails. We're getting insight into the process and Connecticut's financial health over the years firsthand from a member of the Appropriations Committee. What he can tell us about controlling the wallet of the Assembly and the conversations in the chambers this legislative session. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Emma Wolforst. With just days left in this legislative session, the Budget and Appropriations Committee have really been the story of this short session. Connecticut already passed a two-year budget last session. Right now, lawmakers are just allocating and making adjustments to the $26 billion set for this fiscal year. From the gavel of last session to the opening of this one, Governor Lamont and lawmakers have been able to boast a very healthy financial state with a rare, historic surplus. Despite that, the budget has and continues to be a battle. Joining me now, stepping out of session to check in with us, Democratic Representative Geraldo Reyes Jr., who serves as Deputy Speaker and is on the Appropriations Committee and Joint Committee on Legislative Management. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on such an important topic for the state of Connecticut, especially during these difficult times when we need to really start taking a look at our economic situation here in the state of Connecticut and tightening up our belt a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, the rallies for, more funding have been coming from so many sectors of the state, especially post-pandemic here. We saw this play out last session as well. A lot of those same groups were back this year from the first day until last week asking for a piece of the state's surplus. You all certainly knew going into this that this was coming. It wasn't going to be an easy short session, if there even is one, to be on appropriations, but kind of set the scene for me for what those early conversations and agreements looked like back in February.
Well, thank you very much for the question. The nonprofits are an important and integral part of the state of Connecticut. They are what I call equal partners of the state of Connecticut, and they provide services for our constituents to fill gaps throughout all the different sectors of our communities. I have the privilege of working with many nonprofits across the city of Waterbury and the state of Connecticut, so I get an opportunity to talk to many, many organizations as well as constituents that use those services. And I'll mention one that out of the many that have been here advocating for more funds, especially during a short session, which are typically what happens is normally they're very difficult because you try to do a full session, if you will, but in such a short, condensed time. So what we're trying to do is, what happens ordinarily is we're just tweaking a budget. In this case, a lot of what's happened is the fact that we have to work with these guardrails, which is what we put into law, has actually been a blessing and a curse at the same time. The blessing is that we have such a large surplus, a fully stocked rainy day fund, and just got a great healthy report a couple of days ago, increasing our surplus. Yep. The downside of that is that, unfortunately, what everybody sees is the state's surplus, and they believe that we just don't want to give them the money or actually work, if you will, more with them hand in hand and trying to help them meet their shortfalls in their budget. And it's not that we don't want to, it's that we have a fiscal responsibility to the Connecticut state budget that we agreed to back in 2019. So to me, I've been here during very down years, right, and that earlier, and some very, very, very drastic cuts were made. And those were very painful and difficult times.
Right.
Last couple of years has been a lot healthier, and Connecticut has rebound nicely. And but I will say, I'm not the greatest fan of the guardrails. I believe that we can do some tweaking, and that's always been my position. But the powers to be appear not to want to budge on the guardrails, and that's where we are right now.
Well, before we talk a little bit more about some of those potential reforms, because I've heard that from other lawmakers as well, that there might be, room to budge. But as you're saying, there's also definitely some opposition to that. Obviously, as you said, this is a rare spot for Connecticut to be in. You said you were there when there were some really down years and when those fiscal guardrails were passed back in 2017. But this is also an unprecedented time with post-pandemic challenges and what social services are saying is really a need for funding. We know Democrats talked about some potential flexibility with fiscal guardrails early in the session, but the governor and the assembly in general have made it clear that they want to stay within the strict spending cap. What do you say, though, to those people who are struggling, frustrated, and as you mentioned, don't understand why lawmakers are being so strict with spending?
I have empathy for all those nonprofits, and as I started alluding to earlier, I have many of them I served the 75th district in Waterbury, which is all downtown and south, almost to Naugatuck, and I have those nonprofits in my district. One that I'm particularly concerned with is the Urgent Crisis Center for Teens, the Wellmore Behavioral Health Program that we're trying really hard to actually figure out a way to how to get them some monies, because these are the folks that are actually taking kids, if you will, young teenagers and young children with emotional issues and behavioral problems out of the emergency room and into a crisis center where they'll be better served as opposed to sitting in the emergency room library or a waiting room for hours on end and then not being able to get much help anyway, because there's not much you can do for an emotionally disturbed child. And so this Urgent Crisis Center is a perfect example of one entity that I believe in my district that really needs to be funded. And we are working with leadership. I have to give the Speaker of the House, Matt Ritter, and the Majority Leader, Jason Rojas, a great deal of appreciation and a hand on what they've been able to try to do to help as many as they can. I believe that the leadership under Speaker Ritter, working with the governor's team, is trying to figure out a way to deal with that shortfall, which is in the neighborhood of $350 million. And the Speaker of the House is working diligently to try to help us with as much as we can of that shortfall. And I'm concerned, and what I say to the advocates, to the nonprofits, keep advocating. We're here. We're empathetic. We hear you, but we are also at the same time have signed up for fiscal responsibility for the state of Connecticut to make up for the lack of fiscal responsibility for many, many years here in the state of Connecticut. And
we've been mentioning, these possible reforms. We know that this is a fluid situation with the state needs a lot of times. What could this, potential reforms or even just a compromise look like here?
I think that, many of the situations are being handled on a case by case, and if you will, it's a triage situation. Really, the most urgent need is the only one that's going to get any attention. There are some agencies that can limp through and get through to the next biennium budget. There are some that have pretty much painted a picture to us that they will not be able to limp along and may have to close and or reduce staff and services. So I say it's almost being treated as a triage situation. First ones that are taken care of are the most wounded. And I think that what those reforms and what those policies could look like are in the form of a grant or a form of a one-time funding, just to get them to the next biennium budget. And again, the state is just trying to do the next right fiscal thing, and the guardrails are, as I said, I was really never a big fan of the guardrails, but I understand why they're there. They have their use, and they're absolutely controlling what we do as a state, uh, as we get into the new biennium budget for
Right.
next year.
Right. And I do want to talk about some of the things that are being funded and worked on. And a major part of appropriations here is making our federal dollars work for us. While we've seen good infrastructure money and sustainable energy grants, the federal funding is still less this year. Part of that, the legislature and those being funded got really used to the amounts during the pandemic era funding, but that's really ended now for a lot of groups. At the same time, we know there are a lot of American Rescue Plan Act dollars going to major state spending this year that's still waiting to be allocated. So talk to me about that sort of Capitol Hill puzzle you all have been working on.
Thank you very much for bringing up the ARPA funds, because we know the state of Connecticut still has ARPA funds available, and they will be again allocated as between leadership here and the State House and Senate, along with the governor's team. And thank God that there still are ARPA dollars available. And I gotta say, the dollars here have been pretty wisely doled out, and I think that Governor Lamont and the leadership here in the State House have been very, very, very careful in what they've done with those dollars and how they've actually spent them. So I think that we're going to be okay when we come out of this short session. It's been a busy beehive here the last 3 weeks. It's going to be even busier the next 7 days. There's a lot of moving parts. As I said, I started as I was speaking earlier to one of your associates there. Prior to even coming on the show today, I was speaking and looking for Appropriations Chair Representative Tony Walker. So there's a lot of moving parts here on a daily basis.
And obviously in our last minute here, as you said, it is super busy over there, especially those last couple days. We know oftentimes you all work right up till that midnight deadline this year, Wednesday, May 8th. But, some people already know their funding, at least, the likely commitment. We know Hartford Public Schools got some more state money that was announced this week. What have you been really proud of or feel like is the most important priority that you think is going to be funded when this session ends?
Two things, always education. I will always advocate for education, number one. And number two, I want to see something done in the arena of helping those with the housing situation, situation, and homeless, because they kind of go hand in hand. So we talked a little bit about education. We talk a lot about early childcare, because that's where the basis of your learning starts anyway. So it's housing, it's education, and it's the homeless, because it's been only made worse by coming out of the COVID. So, COVID made things worse, but COVID also exposed a lot of shortcomings that were already there long before COVID came in.
Absolutely. Well, Representative Reyes, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. But thank you so much again for being here with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And certainly we'll be on Capitol and Budget Watch on all platforms over the next few days. Still more to come here, though, on Real Story as we get ready to close out this session with lots still to be done. Up next, we're talking to Senator James Maroney about his big AI bill and what it'll take to get that passed before time is up.